So over the past now over a week or so, I've been looking at all of the kind of reactions and a little bit of the fallout, or a lot of the fallout, with regards to the protesting, the rioting, and the looting, as consequent to the George Floyd murder. And it's been frustrating. It's been annoying. I laugh when I'm like nervous, I guess. Um, but it's been very annoying. It's been very frustrating. Um, it's made me angry to a certain degree. And the reason for it, I believe, is because so many people have just jumped immediately on the judgment, and they did that so quickly, and I felt like it was so unfair. And people, I was just wishing every time I would see a comment, a post, a share, I was just wishing that people would acknowledge more of the emotions that were getting people to that point, that were getting people out to the street and manifesting all of these things. Um, and in the back of my mind, I kept thinking like, we've been enclosed as a result of the pandemic, and so there's been a lot of things to process. But then it's like George Floyd happened, and just right before him it was Breonna Taylor, and just like a short couple of weeks it was Ahmaud Arbery. And so it just seemed like we were dealing with so many kind of emotions, and the fact that people were not really stopping to acknowledge those, and kind of just assess the kind of like what was the kind of the mindset. um, it, to me that was just a lot. And every time I kept seeing friends share these things, I almost wanted to be like, what is, like, whoa, like, stop it. Um, and the thing that I kept thinking through all of this is that there are so many layers, and I hear a lot of people saying, well, we need conversations and we need to have conversations. Yeah, we do. Um, we need a lot of ears, more so, I believe, than we need a lot of just understanding. And I say understanding because understanding doesn't necessarily require agreement, but it demands acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is what we kind of need. Um, Now, within all the layers of racism and injustice, the a lot of us have stories that we can tell. A lot of us are telling stories, and so just one of the stories that I will share is how, I guess I would say, quite frankly, when politics got personal for me. Um, I'm Dominican, but I walk around with the kind of with the assumption that I'm black. People automatically assume I'm black anywhere I go. And so I'm always in this place of, but wait, but I'm Dominican. um, and always trying to make the clarification, not because I feel any sort of negative way with the being identified as black or African American, but just because black has so many faces. Um, and so, for that reason and that reason alone, whenever I feel necessary, will I clarify that. But in 2016, a group of friends of mine were sitting around and we were eating ice cream. Out of all things, it was a Sunday after church, and we just went for ice cream. And we were sitting in this was in Houston, and so we were sitting in kind of in an open area, open space, family friendly environment. And there were maybe 5 of us, females and males. And so, out of all things, we were just talking about our family dynamics. And there were a couple of us from, me, Dominican, there was a Mexican, a Guatemalan, there was a Puerto Rican, um, and there was, I believe, another Mexican with us as well. And so we're sitting around the table eating our ice cream, and as we're talking about like how we were raised and how we had so many similar experiences, from like strict parents to how they enforced curfew to how they were like, don't talk to boys, to kind of all the expectations that they laid on us. And although from different places, we all sort of had the same upbringing. And as we're sitting there and we're going on and on about, like, oh, well, my dad and my mom and my siblings and my sister and all of this, we were just talking in Spanish. It's like the most natural thing for us to do. It's innate. Spanish is just like it's my go-to. That's just it. I was born and raised speaking Spanish. And so then out of the blue, I see this gentleman out of the corner of my eye, and he's sitting kind of like the next table over. And as he's sitting there, he is like kind of nodding along. And I kind of see him as like, he's kind of like, he's light skinned. He was just white looking, but we're in Houston, and it's like Houston is known to be one of the most diverse cities in the United States. And so, I've learned not to assume, even though it happens to me, but I've learned not to assume what other people kind of know, what their communication defaults are. And so, just because of the diversity. And so, because that can get you in trouble really fast, assuming one thing but then realizing something completely different. And so, I kept seeing this man kind of nodding every once in a while, like, and I'm processing, like, maybe he understands what we're saying. I mean, after all, like, we're in Houston, people speak Spanish like you wouldn't believe. It happens kind of more often than not. And so then we're just kind of going on, and as we're kind of maybe a little bit wrapping up, or our conversation was winding down, then the gentleman just all of a sudden stands up, and he comes to us, and he just like starts yelling at us, and he says, "Stop speaking Spanish," and he starts cursing at us, and he says, "Go back to your country." And so we just froze, and we just stopped. And at that moment, it's kind of hard to think of like, what do you do, And so I remember just one friend, one of my male friends, he stood quiet, silent, just kind of just kind of stood tall, and just kind of letting the gentleman know with his presence to just walk away. And so after the gentleman just kind of finished cursing at us, then the gentleman just kind of stumps off and just starts walking off. After he just walks off, then we all just kind of sit in silence, complete silence, until one of my friends breaks the silence, and she goes, "Do you realize like what would have happened? I mean, he could have, this is Texas, he could have just pulled the gun out on us." And after that, nobody said anything. We just kind of sat, kind of like in awe. And it's kind of hard to process. um, because we're just sitting eating ice cream on a Sunday after church. And so, ah, 2016, it was, it got personal. it, it just got personal. Um, I've grown up in a family where my dad loves talking politics, Dominican politics. He can talk Dominican politics all day long. And so I grew up seeing how um, politics just creates this tension and this when argument starts and people start discussing ideals, um, it, it it's uncomfortable, right? And so it's one of those taboos, right? Don't talk politics. Just like maybe don't approach religion too closely in some circles. Um, but after experiencing that, I have to say that I was always aware that I was always a diversity factor. Anywhere I went, I was very aware and conscious that I was the diversity factor. Immediately I would enter a room, there was diversity. And I was almost proud of that. However, after those type of incidents, and after kind of witnessing something like that firsthand, it's hard not to walk into a group setting and scan the room to see what the room is made up of. I am hyper aware what the proportions are of maybe of white and color people in the room. I do it whether I'm at church. I do it whether I'm just out and about, and I'm just hyper aware because it this has been an underlying thing, but it's been so emboldened. And knowing that I walk around with people assuming what I am, where I fit, just because of the way I look, it it makes me walk around with a certain awareness at all times. So seeing how people react to some of these things, it's hard. It's hard because it's personal for a lot of people. It's just personal when you experience these things. When you have people that just completely disregard. No. When people express such hatred, rejection, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to look at everybody the same. I have a lot lovely white friends. But walking around, it's hard not to wonder who amongst the crowd is a racist. It's just hard. And And although it's hard, I'm hopeful. Um, but I'll say this, that the the one the only thing I could muster to post, um, after kind of finding out about George Floyd, and the horrific um, manner of his death, and kind of seeing all of what was going on around that. Um, the only thing that kept coming to mind is, blessed are those that hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. And that's my source of hope, because the only thing that I kept thinking is, I may not see the human solution in sight, but I hold on to that promise. And so I'm hopeful. My experience is not the same as a lot of people. Can compare to a lot of other things. But it is one, but I experienced one of the layers. And so, yeah, there's layers, but I'm hopeful. That's my story.